In this week's episode of Adaptation, Deborah sits down with Rachel Yoder, the author of Nightbitch. It's Rachel's debut novel she didn't think anyone would read. Then, Annapurna Productions comes calling and wants a deal. Suddenly, Rachel Yoder is in Hollywood. Nightbitch. Hear the story behind the story. Hi, Rachel Yoder. Thank you for coming on Adaptation.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm such a huge fan of Nightbitch. I think I read it right when it came out, and what I'm talking about is this book that you wrote. Oh, look, my nails are matching. That was not done.
How coincidental.
Yep, bodes well for our conversation. I'm always like a little nervous to give the description of somebody else's book, but you can correct me if I'm wrong from my description. Night Bitch is about, from my reading, a young mother who believes she's turning into a dog in the reductive sense. But what I felt it was really about was a woman's insatiable hunger to create art and how marriage, motherhood, and friendships both sate and challenge that hunger. And to me, as someone who's neither a mother nor married, the book read like a kind of love letter to living a life or figuring out how to live a life that's filled with love and creative intention and the need to not have those be disparate entities, but pieces that inspire and nourish each other.
That was perfect. And I want to thank you so much for foregrounding art in your description of it, because I think obviously a lot of people connect with the motherhood story. But what I was really thinking about so much when writing this was how to live a life with art at the center, even when there's a lot of other big things orbiting around, how to integrate all those parts. So I think that was a gorgeous description of the book.
I think most artists struggle to figure that piece out, to figure out how to either survive monetarily, how to survive creatively, you know, how to go to CVS and the grocery store and, maybe work your day job and fuel that creative need that you have, which is it's overwhelming. People are like, "Why do you do it? It's so hard. Your life seems so impossible," but there's never an answer to that other than I I'm just I have to.
Yes, and I think right now, given, the state of the industry, given the state of the government, things can feel really hopeless. People are out of work. Um, Fascism is encroaching. And so, how do you write inside of and against hopelessness, or inside of and against not having any money, or a sense of chaos? I think for me, I've been writing for 25 years, and I'm really interested in questions of like longevity and art and how you do it over a long amount of time and what drives you, and how it can really feed you. And I think Night Bitch was a part of that questioning.
It sounds like you feel a distinct difference between maybe when you started writing and what that meant to you or what you were trying to get across on the page and how it feels now. Does it feel more urgent now to you given all of the things that you just discussed?
I mean, it felt pretty urgent when I started writing Night Bitch personally. And I think when I began writing in my 20s, when I really sort of stepped into the identity of I am a writer, this is what I'm going to do with my life. It was also that came out of a personal crisis, and sort of who am I now that I've left my family and left my Mennonite religion and left Ohio and I'm here all by myself. And so I think whenever I do sort of come to a crisis point, writing has been the tool I use, but then I also sort of use it as a practice when I'm not in crisis. I think now maybe is one of the more challenging times, I think, for me to be a writer, because I'm asking myself questions about, well, is this really like worthwhile? Should I be spending my time doing something that actually makes a difference? Um, but when I'm kind of get most honest with myself, I mean, I do believe that stories actually make a difference and writing actually makes a difference. So I just keep returning to it.
That makes sense to me. I mean, in all ways, right? In ways of that we need stories sometimes to escape, and that we need stories sometimes to be mirrors of our experiences so that we don't feel so alone.
Yeah,
But
I think that's very well put. Writing isn't just one thing, right? And there are all these different ways in which we use it as writers and also use it as readers or viewers.
speaking of viewers, that's a good segue to I was reading or I was listening to an interview you did, I believe it was called Writing Matters. And you were talking about how when you first started writing Night Bitch or what became Night Bitch, you ended up with 70 pages. You weren't planning on writing a novel and you ended up with 70 pages and you said something like it you didn't know if it was going to be a short story and then you were like, "Oh crap, I didn't mean to write a short story." And then it felt to you like the first act of a script. And
Hmm.
I was curious because then you went on to turn it into a novel. Um, why did you decide to not just write it as a screenplay and go for the novel?
Great question. I did not feel like I had screenplay within my repertoire. It wasn't even really sort of on my radar at that point. You know, I had degrees in fiction and nonfiction. I was really comfortable with like short form, with essay, with short stories. I didn't even really have aspirations to be a novelist. I thought I was going to write a collection of essays when I started writing Night Bitch. And then one of them caught my attention. It had a really striking voice. And I thought that voice isn't quite me. It's, and who is she and what does she have to say? She's real angry. So it seems like maybe there's more there. I wound up with this initial 70 pages, which felt like just the least ideal length to write anything, right? Like it's way too long for a short story. It's probably too short even for a novella. What do you do with such a thing? I have always been interested in screenwriting. I've taken screenwriting courses. I just never could really conceptualize how I would ever break into that. Like it just seemed so outer space to me. So coming to a project where I had this thing that was 70 pages and I thought, okay, I need to write something even longer. I don't know anything about novels. I've never taken a novel writing class, but I do have the scaffolding that I've learned through screenwriting, right? Like, oh, there is this structure that's very comforting and maybe can help provide a roadmap through a novel. Who knows? And it also seemed to me like the end of those first 70 pages very clearly marked a point of no return and very clearly felt like the end of a first act that would very easily then send the protagonist off, into the upside down world of the second act.
In screenwriting, they say show, don't tell, right? So were there things when you were using screenwriting beats for your novel that didn't translate in that same kind of way that you were maybe showing more than telling, if there was like a lack of interior dialogue that you then had to pull out?
So I had come most recently out of a nonfiction writing program before I wrote this novel. So I was really kind of invested in the form of the essay and what that meant, what it meant to be an essayist. And the one of the really valuable things that that program gave me is that it really encouraged us to say, okay, well, what do short stories, how do those inform essay writing? How do fiction techniques inform essay writing? And so I really got this sense of, for better or for worse, I can do whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. Yes, I like came up through a fiction program that was very show don't tell. And then I went through this essay program. And as I was writing the novel, I remember because the first 70 pages are pretty ranty. There's a lot of just, interiority. You're in the main character's head, a lot of thinking. And I think had I been a younger writer and less confident, I would have said to myself, I can't do this. It's way too talky, it's too telling. Who was she who thought she could do this, who could do whatever she wanted? But I went into it with this sense of like, fuck it. Like, I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to write it exactly how I want. I'm going to say it however I want. And it was probably because I was a mom now. I had I had spent 2 years of not writing a word and dedicating myself to my child. And I was really ready to step back into that space of like, no, like I deserve this. I deserve to say exactly what I want to say. And I also told myself, I don't have to show this to anyone. No one ever has to read this. And I think that also gave me the freedom to write it however I wanted to. So I think I was just like bringing in every tool that I had, like short story, essay, screenplay. Let's like bring it all to bear and see what we can do.
I love that so much. I think I sometimes feel like when people ask what I write, sound like a crazy person when I talk about, well, I do journalism, but I also write nonfiction books, but I just finished a fiction book, but also I write songs. And I feel like people are like, kind of jack of all. Um, but there's no differentiation for me. Like it's literally like we were just talking about, they're all stories, they all have arcs. It's only helpful to me at any rate to have experience in all of them. It only makes each piece stronger. It doesn't make it I hate that whole like you have to choose a lane.
Yeah, I mean, and how great to have songwriting in your pocket too, right? And to be able to kind of have that inform your prose and bring musicality and rhythm and that sensibility into your prose. I mean, I do think that that's probably what all artists who have been practicing for a while, like what all writers are sort of doing. How do we like dump it all into whatever project, whatever form we're working in?
You had already had an agent that was representing you for from years prior from a book of essays that you had written,
I
right?
wrote a book of short stories that did not get published because the publisher went under. But yes, I already had an agent who was, I hadn't talked to in years, and then I'm like, hey, I have a novel. Yeah.
Right. Were they like, what?
I mean, I think we had, casually been in touch, but I did sort of say, hey, will you read this and tell me whether I should keep writing it? I sent her those first 50 or 70 pages, and I was like, is this insane or should I keep going? And she's like, it is insane and you should keep going.
That's the perfect response.
Yeah, yeah.
And then how long approximately did it take from like when you gave her those 70 pages, she was like, yes, to when you had a draft that she was ready to send to publishers?
Maybe 2 years. I would probably have to go back and check, but yeah, it was a hot minute until it was ready to go out the door.
I mean, 2 years isn't sounds long to most people, but not to people who write books.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it was pretty fast.
At any point, were you thinking about, wow, this would make a really great movie? Or did you know?
I
Like
thought it would not make a great movie.
the total
I
opposite.
mean, because it is so interior, especially the first, third of it.
So when did that conversation first happen with, I presume it was with your agent?
It was pretty wild. So my book went out on submission in January 2020. It probably sold in February, early February 2020. It was really a really fast submission process. After a few early no's, there were a little quick interest, and then it sold. And then maybe a week later my agent called me and said, I need to introduce you to your film agent. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, "You have a film agent now because there are producers who are interested in turning this into a film." And that was the first it came it became a possibility. And so I met my film agent and was off talking to producers as the world shut down and COVID happened. And it was this very surreal, unsettling experience of sort of this great thing happening amidst extreme uncertainty and precarity. And we were off to the races with the movie.
I mean, there's so many things to say about that. First of all, I love how the publishing industry, nobody tells you anything. They're just like, "Oh, you have a film agent." Like,
Well, and I'm like, how does anyone know this is even happening? How do they have the manuscript?
yeah, how do they have the manuscript? What does a film agent do? Do I have any say in that? Wait, what? Like everything is so not transparent. Then also the COVID, like having something so incredible happening at that time, not only COVID and then Black Lives Matters and then shutdowns. My first book came out in June 2020. Those months leading up to it, trying to figure out how to celebrate this thing that you had spent 2, 4, 5 years on and be in the most terrifying, devastating time in the world. That was super impossible.
Yeah, it was just a whole new level of intensity. And then pair that with I'm talking to Amy Adams on the phone and have calls with producers and don't even know what the point of the call is. And like, like notoriously in the industry, like, what is this call even for? What do I talk about? My agent say, "Oh, you just chat." And I'm like, okay.
None of us, like we just said, know how any of this stuff works, what the process is like. So when you're talking to these different production companies, are they kind of were they pitching you like their vision for it? Were the initial calls kind of just meet and greets like your agent said, and they're feeling you out to see if you would be a a person that they could potentially work with because it's going to take a while, right, to have you involved in whatever the kind of contract you guys come up with and then making it.
Hmm.
How are those conversations and how are those conversations?
Yes, I did know pretty early on that as part of the deal, I wanted to write an adaptation because I did see this, I was probably 41 by the time this happened. And I thought, it's now or never, babe. Like, if you want to write a script, if you want to try and, do something with screenwriting, here is your chance. So I was really upfront with the fact that if you want the rights to this, I want to write an adaptation. I want a chance to write a script. um some of the smaller producers were totally fine with that and welcomed it, and were excited about that. And then sort of the front runner and the folks who wound up getting the rights were Annapurna, who were the biggest of all the production companies I talked to, and had the most sort of clout, especially after Amy Adams came on. That was something that happened before any contracts were signed. I probably talked with, I don't know, like 10 different producers or production companies who were interested. And was really kind of deciding between two. One who said, yes, you write it. We have an actor who's interested. We'll find a director. Um, we might not be as big as some of the people you're talking to, but let's do this. And then I had Annapurna, who was a little bit more, hesitant, like, you're crazy. Like, you've never written a script. You don't have a script to show us. But okay. And they were a little bit more hesitant. Then Amy came on. I talked with her and it was kind of like, okay, well, if they're willing to negotiate this opportunity into this deal, then we'll go with them. It took us maybe like 8 months to even get to, like, an agreement. And so that was finally, where we went in the end.
And so the agreement was that you write a draft of the script, but that they wouldn't necessarily, it wasn't guaranteed that that was the script that they would use. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, always in the back of my head, there wasn't a director on the project yet. And, I was thinking, well, whatever director is going to take this is probably going to want to have their own vision and do their own script. I mean, I do think you have to be sort of delusional to make it as a writer. You have to be in touch with the dream. You always have to be in touch with the dream. And so I kind of just kept that in sight, that like maybe if you just write it exactly how you want to write it and do the best you can, like maybe it'll still hit. And even though it didn't get used, and even though Marielle Heller did have a different vision, it has served me very well. And I'm actually really glad that I went through that process, and that it's now kind of opened a door. Like I do have something that I can show people, and it has given me a bit of credibility now going into future projects.
Tune in next week for part 2 with Rachel Yoder here on Adaptation.